beautiful people. This is Beauty Manifested and I am Danny the TH, and today I'm going to talk about garden ancestry and the history of gardening in my family. And I hope that this video will inspire y'all to reflect on how gardening has played a role in your family, some of the memories that you have involving nature, involving flowers, involving growing your own food, so that we can reconnect to our inner child, reconnect to our ancestry, and reconnect to Mother Earth herself. So I did prepare some notes. I think I'm gonna go ahead and just read from it because I really like that, and then I will elaborate as necessary. So, the history of gardening in my family. I'm fortunate to have two grandmothers who garden. And so my garden story began in my backyard in Michigan with my great-grandfather, Poppy. And that's on my maternal side. So that's my mother's grandfather. Poppy, he taught me to grow a garden in my backyard, and it was so much fun. We grew green beans and we grew tomatoes. The neighbor, I feel like this always comes on when I'm trying to talk, but hopefully you guys can still hear me. I feel like my voice animates well. But we grew green beans and we grew tomatoes, and then the neighbor who shared a fence with us, he was a gardener too. So it's like he was in our backyard, but we shared a fence, and it was just like one of those metal fences, so you could see each other really well, and it wasn't that tall either. So we shared a fence, and he was a gardener, and he was an old man, and he would share his produce and seeds with us, and he was just so sweet. And I remember when he got sick and couldn't care for the garden anymore, I wish I could go back now and care for it for him, but at the time, I guess I just didn't have that idea. So his garden kind of just turned into a jungle, and I just remember it being really sad. And his kids would come take care of him, but they didn't come take care of the garden because it just wasn't their passion. But that was really memorable for me because, one, it was like getting to connect to your neighborhood and your community through gardening, and getting to share seeds and plants with a neighbor was like really beautiful. And I don't know if I would have had a relationship with that old man without my grandfather and without my garden. So that was really wonderful. And that man, he ended up passing away, but he really did have an impact on me. And my grandfather, my Poppy, he's also passed away now, but both of them were really impactful in my gardening journey. So back then, I loved to cook, and my family still talks about the fried green tomatoes that I would grow. My Poppy is said to have grown perennial geraniums. He was very in tune with plants and could keep plants alive for years and years. We actually have a dumb-cane plant in our home. It's a different Poppy. It's so beautiful. I'll have to show you guys one day. And it has been propagated from a plant that my grandfather had in the 1950s. And there are at least 4 family members who also have a clone of this plant in their home. This feels so magical to me because it's like I have a piece of my great-grandparents that lives on, even though they are not with us anymore. Because I have the clone of the plant that they once grew. And it just feels so magical because the plant holds that energy. So my grandparents are always with me. And I would say I'm someone who handles death really well. Probably like oddly well. Like people probably wonder if I'm like a psychopath or something. But I remember when, not my great-grandfather, but my other grandfather who died, he passed away just this past November. And of course I was sad, but it's sad, but for some reason, after my father told me, I felt my grandfather with me stronger than ever. Stronger than ever. Like, it's like I could feel him sitting next to me. And I just felt this peace, and I knew everything was going to be okay. And my paternal grandmother, Laura, she actually lives with us. She's been living with us since I was at least in 3rd grade, and she pretty much raised me. Like, she's the #1 role model that I can remember in my life, and most of my time and my days were spent with her. She would volunteer at my schools, from elementary and preschool. She would drive me to cheer practices. Like, my grandma has been really, really significant in my life. And she grew gardens. Y'all probably know her as Gigi because she has some videos on my channel. Grandma Laura is awesome, and I love her approach to gardening. One of her favorite quotes is that you don't just throw a seed at the ground and say, grow, damn it. If you want something to grow, then you must care for it. She taught me to look deeper into gardening to be able to extract life lessons. She's a Scorpio woman and always reads between the lines and sees beneath the surface. So Granny L is from LA. That stands for Lower Alabama, and she was born in the 1930s. She had 15 siblings and they grew food and caught seafood to feed the family. They weren't gardening for joy and luxury like me. They were farming to live and sustain their family. Farming was hard work. When she grew up, got married, and started a family of her own, she became very active in the community. As a teacher, she would teach her students to grow beans and teach them the joys of caring for something and then reaping the fruits of her labor. As a community leader in her neighborhood, she would sow seeds in her community spaces so that beautiful flowers would grow and increase the value of the homes. My grandma loves free 99. She starts by seed and propagates everything. She doesn't believe you have to spend a whole lot of money to grow a garden. She doesn't believe that you have to spend a whole lot of money to live a good life. Fast forward to the condo that her and my grandfather purchased at their retirement home, and this is where many of my earliest memories were made. They had a small front yard garden, and they would take me to the Eastern Market on the weekends to browse and socialize. We would buy flowers, usually hanging baskets, to decorate the front property. And my grandma would sit on the porch and let me play in the mud all summer long. We would collect ladybugs, play with worms, we would feed the birds and geese, we would dance in the rain. These were the best days of my life. My grandmother allowed me to explore the universe right there in her front yard. She taught me that it was okay to get a little dirty. My maternal grandmother, Mish, is a Parisian queen. She looks, smells, and acts like royalty. She looks like a rich woman. I wanted to be just like my grandma. She was so cool. I remember when I would go over to her house and she would be working on her front flower bed while us kids rode our bikes up and down the street. She had the most beautiful house on the block. She put a lot of time and effort into her home, and it was different every year. My grandma likes variety. When I was little, she had this beautiful gold hair that would shimmer in the light, and to me, she looked like a sun goddess. In her backyard, she would get these silly faces that you could nail to the trees, and it would make it look like the trees were alive. My grandma loves antiques and secondhand shops, so her decor was always had a lot of personality. And I love the way that she gardened, and the way that she had her home, and it was like a collection of so many things, and it was so expressive and artistic. At the time, it was very unique because a lot of the other neighbors that I would see, their yard wasn't like that. But now I live in Texas, and a lot of the Mexican abuelitas, like the little old ladies, they grow gardens, and their gardens are very eclectic and kind of like a collector's garden as well, which I feel like is so fun because it reminds me of my grandma. And I'm like, wow, like I didn't know anyone had a similar style as her. Like they'll have all kinds of different pots, and they'll have little makeshift it's super cute little bird baths, and not necessarily like everything matches. It's like you can tell that they've collected many items over time. So that's something that has been super duper fun, and I really appreciate the little Hispanic ladies because they remind me so much of my grandma. I think my grandma instilled my love language of gift because she is so open-handed. She had this beautiful fountain in her yard that I always loved, and eventually she gave it to my family so that we could have it at our house. She would grow all sorts of things in the backyard, but her favorite thing to grow was roses. She had so many vibrant, healthy rose bushes. I remember that if a family member passed away, she would buy a rose bush and plant it, and she would tell me that the rose bush belonged to our now dead family member. Her brother in Colorado grew a garden too, and he also is a master craftsman. He can build anything. They just laid this new walkway with pavers, and it looks like a work of art. Literally, like it looks like old, like Roman Empire, like cobble, like it looks so good. They're so talented. And he lost his son to cancer, and they built a garden dedicated to him. This left a lasting impact on the way I relate to gardening. To me, your garden will live on forever and ever, just as your spirit will live on forever. Cremate me and bury the ashes in my garden. My grandmother's garden was fun. She would find a beautiful antique structure to add to the garden. She would repurpose old metals, and it made the garden feel like a historical landmark. It was so magical. I felt like her garden had a story to tell. I had one grandmother who farmed to live and to learn about life. I had one grandmother who was a collector and an artist and created beautiful ancestral art altars in the garden. I honor and respect the beauty that these women created in the world. Truly. My aunt also grows a beautiful garden. She used to grow food while she was living in Detroit, and now she has one of the most beautiful cut flower gardens I've ever seen. What I love about my aunt is that I know she gives her all to everything that she does, but she makes it look so easy and effortless. Like, my aunt works hard. She's a busy bee. But from the outside looking in, it looks like everything she does is just perfect. Like, literally, like, she could just throw seeds at the ground and grow a forest. Like, she makes everything look easy. She's amazing. She's a true artist. My brother is a gardener too. He likes growing fruit trees and berries. I really like his manly man approach to gardening. He's all practicality and sustainability, giving little care to the aesthetics of it all. My nieces love being out in the yard with him, and I absolutely adore the memories they are getting to make in the garden. My sister is also learning to garden. She does great in containers, and she enjoys processing the foods more than I do. She makes pickles and salsas, whatever else she sees on Pinterest. My parents have not been very into gardening, but my mom loves to create an oasis of her yard through mulch and furniture. My daddy built me my first garden and set up my first irrigation system too. I have been provided the perfect family to support my zone of genius. I think of Bill Gates, who miraculously ended up at a school that was one of the only schools to have a computer, which allowed him to begin the journey of founding Microsoft. Is it William Buffett? I can't remember the guy's first name, but you know Buffett. He's super rich. Miraculously, he was born into a home that, and I learned these quotes actually from the book The Originals. I definitely would recommend it. It's super duper duper good. It's The Originals, something about nonconformists. I would recommend it. But anyways, whoever Buffett, Mr. Buffett, billionaire Buffett, miraculously was born into a home that had a library with finance books, and he was able to begin his investing journey while he was still a child. Well, I was born into a family that gardens and empowers my gardening. I know that this is my zone of genius, and I am grateful to be living in it intentionally now. I live to garden. God is my first love, my family is second, and after that is my garden. I am so grateful to grow gardens.